Hello there, my name is Todd, and you are listening to the Dungeon Speak podcast. And I wanted to thank you for taking the time to listen to these backstories that the players and myself have worked together to create for you and anybody who wants to stop in and listen. It takes a lot of effort to create these backstories for each of the characters and make sure that it is a compelling and adventurous tale each and every time, and that all of these characters are unique and special in their own way. And every bit of effort is worth it as long as it is enjoyed by other people. Thank you again, and I hope you enjoy everything we've done. And I hope you enjoy listening to the backstory and life going forward of Kronos and his fellow Titans.
Hello, I think. You will have to forgive me. It has been a long time since I have spoken to others, or spoken out loud at all. Empty space, darkness, loneliness, nothing but my thoughts. That is what I have known for a very long time. Thousands of years, at least? Maybe tens of thousands? I lost track after a while. How did I escape? I didn't. I simply woke up, had a few days to think about where I am, and that I was not being tricked by my mind, and I decided what needs to be done. I've ran into a few unscrupulous demonic creatures out here. I can promise that I did not attack them out of maliciousness. I gave them a chance to talk, but they were quite rude and violent. However, they did not know who they were speaking to. From what I have gathered from the demonic creatures that did speak, there was a celestial creature that I have never heard of. Her name escapes me at the moment. She was stalking evil creatures and preparing to fight them. I'm not sure. Wherever or somewhere in there, she fought the evil creatures. However, the evil presence affected her. She was weak. She became one of these evil creatures, but here's the fun part. She fought them good enough to end up ruling them. So now, the celestial and divine creature that was pursuing evil is now leading evil. Then, I'm not sure about this bit, it seems convoluted, but some people or force of good went to her centuries later and convinced her to do better. Crazy, I know. So this celestial being turned evil leader is now good again. So she leaves, teleports, or does something. Somehow, in the mix-up of all this bipolar conflict within herself, she loses some artifact. This artifact proves who is in charge of an entire realm or some big and powerful place. So now, out there in this mortal world is the big and bad artifact that just anyone can wear to control, have a lot of influence, and other abilities in this evil place. As you can imagine, some creature finds it, wears it, and travels to this other place and has no idea what they're doing. So of course, it all goes up in smoke, as they say. Here's the fun part that benefits me. Apparently in this realm there's an eternal battle between two evil forces of different realms. So when the leader is gone and the misuse of power happens, then the effects can be catastrophic. That is up to and including releasing beings that have been banished to the void for eternity, and now they traverse the existing realms. But I must apologize, I have rambled. I am still processing this development and how to use it to my benefit entirely. I must now be going. There is much to do, and my kin need my assistance.
All that could be heard was a strong wind and pebbles being tossed down the side of a mountain as someone passed the time. The only smell was dry and dead air on tops of stones that overlooked a mountainside. The ground was so far down from this mountaintop that you could not see it with mortal eyes. 3 centaurs are the only presence that can be seen standing among this dark, rocky terrain. Golden armor that had lost its sheen long ago protect their human torsos, and weapons grace their sides along their equestrian legs. One centaur presides over the peak of this mountaintop. His bow rests on the stones next to him as he slowly surveys the mountainside. His trained eyes narrow in on the terrain, affording him a more detailed surveillance. He was the eyes of the mountain. Another centaur had a large sword in one hand, the blade point resting on the ground, and the length of the blade was about 6 feet long. He held a stare at the rock side, about 40 feet below the centaur with the bow, and had steady breath as he just stared. On the same landing, another centaur stood at the top of a pathway that led down the mountain. A long sword hung on his side, and a shield rested against a large boulder. In one hand he had a large hammer, with a flat and square surface on one side, and a dull point that went out about 4 inches on the other. Intricate designs and symbols decorated the hammer. He lightly tossed small pebbles in the air as he swung the hammer to bat them off the side of the mountain. He listened to the sound of each one tumble until it faded away into nothing, before he did it again. The centaur picked up a pebble. Despite the plate helmet covering his face, a resounding sigh can be heard, and he bats another pebble off the mountaintop. He lazily hit the pebble off the mountain, but then his fingers loosened. A curved blade slices through the gap of the armor between the back and the neck of this centaur. A scythe slides effortlessly through his flesh as his eyes widen and the hammer falls to the ground. The centaur facing the rocks narrows his eyes, starts to raise the blade, and his front legs start to bend. He gets into a charging position, straight into the rock, without looking towards his fallen brethren. He raises the blade into an offensive position. The blade becomes square with his shoulders as he raises it, and the blade lights up with a bright orange glow. However, as he starts his charge towards the rock, his back legs give way. A golden staff swings hard, breaking both of his legs in quick succession. His blade glows brighter as he cries out in pain, yet he adjusts his grip and begins to prepare to throw the sword like a spear to the rocks. The scythe blade is seen again as the arm is severed just above the elbow. At that moment, the centaur on the mountaintop picks up his bow. The bow has no visible string, but as the centaur starts to draw an invisible arrow, then a string and arrow appear made out of a bright orange glow. The centaur starts to take aim downward, and bright golden wings burst out of the centaur's side. He flaps his wings in a strong thrust and lifts up about 10 feet off the ground as he takes aim. However, a scythe in one hand and a golden staff in the other, 2 hands raise up into the air. The air around the archer starts to vibrate. His skin compresses, and his muscles and bones vibrate. Then, the scythe and the staff are quickly dropped. With that motion, so is the centaur. Visuals of the centaur disappear behind the mountaintop as dirt, rocks, and dust puff up into the air with the impact of over 2,000 pounds of horse, man, and plate armor. White whimpering and gritted grunts are the last thing to be heard as the large sword is picked up with the severed arm falling to the ground, and the sword is slid through the chest of its previous owner. Then the sword is dropped to the ground with a loud clang. In the quietness, the hammer lies on the stone. A strong hand with pale skin but glowing yellowish veins reaches down and picks up the hammer. In reaction to that, the rock facing has eyes that light up. The eyes have purple pupils and black irises. The eyes frantically look around as the rock facing is struck by the hammer. The first strike creates a loud and thunderous sound. The second strike has loose rocks falling and cracks the facing. The third strike knocks many large pieces off the rock wall. The strikes cease, and the hand pulls away from the wall. The wall begins to shift. The rocks themselves seem to shift back and forth. The rocks begin to form a humanoid shape. Then one rocky leg pulls away from the wall, then another. Then this figure uses the ground as leverage and pulls the rest of their figure away from the rock facing. This strange rocky figure stands in the mountaintop's darkness. It looks around at the clouds surrounding the mountain as it stretches, seeming to be growing as it stretches. The hammer is held out to the rock being. The purple eyes look at the hammer. Their eyes lift to look at the wielder, and then they reach out and take the hammer. The rock creature looks at the ground, at the sky. They look back at the rescuer and nod their head. Your legacy awaits.
A large, brown-skinned and horned creature falls to a muddy ground with a splash. The terrain is mostly dirt with bits of grass and small clumps, and is littered with the bodies of grotesque creatures. Demonic forms, limbs, and thick black blood cover the ground. Dozens of them. This last demon fighter falls to the ground in the blood of other demons as a figure walks by. Golden veins pulse through this human-looking figure. With tan skin, long flowing white hair, and a muscular form, he walks through this field of corpses. He approaches a demon cowering behind a rock.
He grips his golden staff and his golden sickle that is long enough to be considered a scythe. He is ready for this demon if he thinks he might fight. He turns around the rock to stare at the demon in the eyes. He takes a moment to pity this creature. It has no chance now. Use your borrowed magic. Open the void.
I cannot. I have no power of that kind.
You can. You will.
If I do this, then my life will be forfeit.
The humanoid figure kneels down, the white stubble of his rugged face aiding to make his facial expression seem stern but soft at the same time. If you do not do this, then your life will be forfeit anyway. Have your life have meaning beyond being a tool. If you aid me, then I can aid you. I know where you go. You can go somewhere else. This scrawny, bony, and weak-looking demon looks down for a moment. Then it reaches into a satchel at its side. It pulls out a small compass-looking contraption with abyssal writing and symbols all over it. He looks towards another rock, at the human, and then back at the rock. The demon chants an abyssal as he pushes a point of this contraption into his hand. They both turn to look at the rock. The side of the rock begins to tremble, as if reality itself is being shaken. Then a tear starts to form. A tear into nothing appears where the rock is. It begins to open wider and longer. After a minute or so, the tearing stops. In the middle of this dirt plain and in front of this large rock, reality has been torn, revealing a place of darkness. Bright yellow eyes appear to float in the darkness as if someone is looking out, at the demon and at the humanoid. The humanoid beckons with a hand gesture, and the demon cowers further into his place of hiding. The figure steps out and into this dirt field. He looks human, standing tall and muscular with a long beard and hair that is gray. He wears only old leather pants with tarnished brass decorations on them. The first humanoid smiles, looks down at the demon, and then slides his sickle into the demon's chest. The demon whimpers, but does not fight back. The humanoid's hands glow with golden luminescence, and the demon's form crumbles into a pile of dust. After that, he looks up at the half-naked human. Find the darkness, shine bright. The second humanoid figure smiles, closes his eyes, and a bright glow shines around him. A full body of thick leather armor begins to glow around him, as if made of pure light, and a bow of light takes shape in his hand. He turns away from the humanoid and the field of demonic corpses as he starts to run. After about 30 feet, the humanoid leaps high into the sky, but keeps going. He starts hovering steadily, and then flies away into the night sky. He flies out of sight, and the humanoid on the ground looks around after the bright light fades into the distance. He sighs to himself as he begins walking back through the corpses of demons. He plans out his next move as he walks at a steady and determined pace.
Smoldering air, burning embers, and smoke fills the air on the inside of a volcano. The inside of a volcano where an older-looking man works. He raises his head quickly from a workbench where he was napping. His wild gray hair bounces around his tan and wrinkled head as he looks around. The embers of his forge still burn brightly. He stood and slowly walked away from his bench. His thick and layered beard swayed as his large belly bounced with each step as he limped away from the bench on a leg made of meteorite metal found among the stars. He could walk and run, but not without difficulty. As he looked around, he heard a voice from behind him. He turned to see a very young woman. Standing before him was a very soft-looking woman with smooth, pale skin, a toned frame, delicate features, and perfect hair. "Hephaestus, I have come to you for a sword," she said softly. Hephaestus smiled and wiped his chin as he just stared at her. "A sword? No, my dear, you need something longer, something harder. I think you'd much rather a spear." He grinned as he looked her up and down. She slowly started backing up. The grass under her feet crunched as she stepped away. "No, just a sword, please." Hephaestus laughed as he held out a spear to her. She gently took it, and he just stared. "Feel it in your hands. Feel the length of it. I know you like it." She looked up from the spear and thrust it back into his hands before turning away. He grabbed her wrist. "Don't walk away from me. Just because you're the only virgin on that mountain up high, that makes you better than me? Your high morals won't get you anywhere down here."
He grunted heavily and attempted to grab her. She turned and started to run away. He gave chase and started after her. He bound on his forged leg. Despite being lame, he was still a god. He moved very quickly and with great strength. As he reached out to grab her again, there was a sharp pain in his chest. Hephaestus looked down to see 3 spears piercing straight into his chest and out his back. He looked back up at Athena, but she was gone. The grass was gone. The open air he was chasing her through was gone. He now stared at his own weapon rack on the far wall of his forge that was secreted away deep in a volcano. He hadn't run across a field of grass at all. He was still in his forge. Hephaestus looked around confused. Had he been sleepwalking? He looked down as the pain surged through him. This was his own weapon. These were his divine spears. He started to cry out but stopped. There was no use. The only god who knew where his forge was couldn't hear him. Even if they could hear him, they would not make it in time. His eyesight began to blur and grow distorted as blood filled his eyes. He grimaced in pain and looked around as his beloved forge started to dim. Now it would be his tomb. He could see 2 stout and strong figures through the smoke. He saw the golden veins of a god, Zeus and Hades, no doubt, come to carry him home and keep his soul in eternal memories. The figures stayed back. Hephaestus knew this was it. There were no more wars. There were no more reasons to keep him around. He smiled slightly. As he closed his eyes for one last time, he wondered if he would get a constellation made after him. As Hephaestus' body slumped on the spears he created, the 2 figures stepped closer. One was a humanoid rock figure with bits of rock floating around his form. He was tall and broad. His eye sockets were deep black holes in a rock head, and as it stepped forward, the rock form seemed to shift to accommodate uneven ground. It looked at Hephaestus and then turned to the grand forge. The other figure looked almost human. He looked like an older man, around 70 years old. He had a layered and long white beard around 1.5 feet long straight white hair that fell to the middle of his back. He wore an old and tattered traditional skirt-like garment with a golden belt, 2 dull golden bracers, and sandals. He was armed with a short scythe and a golden staff. His eyes were a bright white with a hint of blue. As he walked up to Hephaestus, his expression changed to sadness. Light blue pupils showed through the light in his eyes. He placed a hand on Hephaestus' shoulder. He gave a slight smile as he pulled a small brown pouch from under his belt. While his hand remained on the shoulder of Hephaestus, the god of blacksmiths, metalworking, carpenters, craftsmen, artisans, sculptors, metallurgy, fire, and volcanoes, the dead god turned into a light and golden dust that flowed into the pouch. The older man turned to the forge and walked to stand beside the rock figure. Let us begin. Several human figures stand with their backs to a setting sun at the top of a large hill. They all look down at a large city of stone, dirt, and rocks as fires and screams can be heard from below. As the setting sun casts shadows over this great city, an orange serpent seems to take shape as the fires spread, the fires caused by war. 3 figures stand out who are surrounded by men clad in bronze armor. Some of these armored men wield bows and swords, but most of them stand at attention using long and bronze-tipped spears. 2 of these 3 figures have horses beside them. One of these people, a pale woman with long brown hair and a blue dress, stand in front of the others. She looks down with tears in her eyes. War is never a good thing, and this is not the first war she has had to watch from the sidelines. Each scream seems to jerk at her. Each time she hears a weapon in the distance, she can feel another thread cut. She can feel another future halting abruptly. 2 other figures stand resolute next to their armored horses. One, a very young-looking man, twirls a wooden-carved swan in his fingers as he strokes his bow that is resting on the horse's back. He has short, brown, wavy hair. He has an athletic build and a toned body clad in brown silken tunic and a bronze silken chlamys over his left shoulder and tucked into a heavy bronze belt. The last of the figures is a young woman with wavy black hair. Her black eyes narrowed as she surveyed the burning city. She wore a white kalubas, modeled after a sleeveless tunic and made of silk. She gripped a bow that glowed blue and purple tightly in her hands, and she wore a leather and gold arm guard on her left wrist. An old soldier rides up, quickly dismounting and standing before the young man. As this soldier in bronze armor takes off his helm and stands next to the boy, a clear difference in size shows. The boy, showing his age, should have been around 6 feet at most, but he towered over this soldier by at least 2 feet. The older soldier, decorations and battle scars showing, saluted the boy. The boy just raised an eyebrow and looked towards the soldier.
Yes?
All soldiers are dead. All blasphemers have been killed. The tribute has been gathered.
All have been killed.
The old soldier looks at the woman in the blue dress before continuing to talk to the boy.
All of the soldiers and the blasphemers. There is only one person remains, if you want to call her that. She is still alive. She is the woman who fought to save the temple. She still fights. She is known. Her name is...
Her name is not important. Go and capture her. Do not kill her. I have a position for her that will keep her tied to this existence that she treasures.
With that, the older soldier gets back on his horse and rides off down the hill towards the city. The young man looks at the young woman and starts to approach the woman in the blue dress from behind. The young woman turns to the soldiers nearby and starts talking to them.
Does it make you sad to see these creatures die?
Creatures. Your wording is chosen carefully as usual. But these were people. They were brothers, sisters, fathers, and mothers. Every soul lost, a soul desired and loved.
You're not seeing the big picture.
The woman in the blue dress smiles slightly to herself as she wipes away a tear.
I only see the big picture.
The young man smirks to himself as he pulls a box out from his silken tunic. It has 6 sides of clear glass inside of a golden frame. He looks back at the woman holding the bow. She has an arrow knocked, and the soldiers surrounding all of them begin to draw their weapons. She begins to approach and take aim at the woman in the blue dress as she continues to stare at the burning city, tears in her eyes but her breath steady.
Then you know what comes next.
Be peaceful. We do not wish to hurt you, but we will.
We do what we must for the betterment of our kind.
Our kind. Interesting.
Do it now. I will not wait.
The young man mutters under his breath, and a blue light emits from around the glass box. The soldiers around them get nervous, and the young woman prepares to fire an arrow. However, there are no more sounds, and the woman in the blue dress does not move. She closes her eyes over soft tears as the screams from the city below echo in her mind. As the boy starts to smile, there is a flash of blue, and the woman is standing there, no more. The soldiers sheathe their weapons. The young woman releases her held breath and relaxes the bow. The young man, however, fingers the box in his hands. The glass box now shines with a blue light inside, and there are shapes of a waxing crescent moon on every side of the box. The 2 figures and the soldiers make their way to the burning city as the sun sets over this hill, leaving no trace as to what happened to the woman in the blue dress. As the sun sets on this solemn hill and the fires of the city below crackle loudly, one soldier approaches the grassy hilltop where everyone previously stood.
Where'd everybody go?
Far to the east of the story we know, far from the troubles of demons, destroyed cities, and the destruction that our heroes have seen, is a peaceful mountain range. It stretches about 750 miles between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. At its base, the temperature is around 60 degrees on average, but quickly lowers to a staggering 18 to 21 degrees as you reach the peaks of the slopes. On the northern peaks of these mountains, the snow can get as deep as 20 to 25 feet. This is the area where a man stares out to the mountains below. His eyes feel at the edge of frostbite with every moment, but he has felt this tingle for a long time. He watches the sun crest over the mountains and hills to the land below. Stiff winds blow through and give him a slight chill as he watches the leaves and trees move far below his elevation. He watches the animals move about with keen eyes. He can see the snow foxes digging through the snow far below. He can see birds waking from treetops. He can even make out the large beasts that move around at the lower slopes of the mountain range. He can see much from his 18,000 feet in the air. One thing that he can see that brings him dread is an eagle, a simple and small bird compared to his 46 feet height. This little eagle could not weigh more than 20 pounds, and this man weighed in excess of 40 tons. Unfortunately, this very large figure was bound. He was bound to this mountain peak with chains that he had been pulling against for an unknown amount of time. He looked down at a recently healed wound. Right where his liver is, there is a small scar. He could see the scar healing even as he looked at it, but it was always healing. Every day his liver and the skin around it would heal. It would stay healed until the eagle circled. Every morning the eagle would circle this mountain peak, sometimes 3 and sometimes 30 times. He would just have to stare at the eagle and wait for it to come. Wait for the eagle to come, latch its claws into his skin on his side, and then use its beak and claws and start cutting and tearing into his flesh. This routine has not started yet, but it gave the man a chill of dread nonetheless. Every day the pain, every day the dread, and every day starts anew. Then this man heard a distant thought in his head, wondering why he was here. He almost wanted to weep. He thought to himself about what had happened. He replayed it in his head 1,000,000 times. He just wanted to help. He just wanted to see the humans be able to fight back against the beasts that his brother had created. The man gave a slight glare to the eagle. Beasts like that thing. The man then heard a distant voice again, but this time asking if he would do it again. The man lowered his head and closed his eyes. He doesn't know if man has progressed since his time up here, but if they still exist and are able to be happy, then yes, he can see the men together, happy, drinking, loving, making love, and this gave him a slight smile. Then the eagle came into view. The eagle stared at him as it circled. When the eagle disappeared from view, the man sighed. He has at least another 5 minutes of peace. The voice of his doubt came again. Why didn't you help your brothers and sisters? Why did you leave your mother, father, cousins, and all of your family to die? A tear started to well up, but the man forced it back. He knows that wisdom used to be his strong suit. He was tactical and always thinking ahead. It was not hard to look around and see the outcome of that war. Zeus and his kin were fresh, young, and very powerful. The Titans were wary, spread out. Responsibilities wore on them, and Kronos had been tricked, poisoned, and sent to Tartarus before it even began. There was just no way for the Titans to prevail. He knew his fate was here forever. But did he make a mistake? Should he have fought alongside his kin? His brother and himself might have made a difference. No, never. Impossible. 2 Titans were not enough. They were stronger than Olympians, but they still did not have their leader, their father, the most powerful among them. Kronos was gone. In that moment, though, as if the world around him was reading his thoughts, the sunlight glared into his eyes and he had to look away. When he looked back, a man was looking at him in midair. This man wore barely anything except a ragged cloth around his waist, but he had golden bracers that stretched his entire forearm. His eyes reflected the brightness of the sun itself, and he had a full great beard that curled down his chest. His long gray hair waved in the wind as he floated in the air in front of this man.
Kronos lives.
The man's mouth and eyes opened wide in amazement and wonder. As this shining figure glows, the man cowers in fear. Does his end finally come? Has he suffered enough? He closes his eyes tightly, but feels a relief. His wrists and legs feel free. He opens his eyes to see the chains falling and clanging against the side of the mountain. The man's eyes burn with fire in them. His beard of red hair grows full and bright. His hair gains the health of youth and straightens. His robes that he had yearned for wrap around him. The red robes drape round his waist and over his torso to his shoulder and flow behind him. His feet are wrapped in the red sandals with gold trimmings. His eyes light up and a smile of happiness and warmth crosses his face that had been tortured for so long. As this man's savior nods and then darts his eyes to the mountainside, the man knows that the eagle is soon to come around the mountain. The man wanted to kill it, but he took wisdom in knowing that the dumb creature was better served being confused for now and buying him time. He leaned off the mountain with hesitation, but felt himself light in the air around him. He looked back at the mountain peak one last time, and then flew west, following his uncle. A man sat on a short cliff, overlooking a tall, grassy field. This man was of large stature and peak human physique. He had long hair and a long beard, both a light golden brown. His eyes were crystal blue with no pupil, and he somberly looked out over the field. Below him, men walked together, arm in arm. They were talking, laughing, and strolling happily amongst the grass on paths. He just stared out, his mind heavy and his heart sad.
Why do you sit by yourself on this beautiful morning?
The voice came from a youthful beauty with long brown hair that flowed behind her, and a long red dress loosely draped over her tan skin. She seemed to shine with a golden aura as her eyes glowed a bright orange that reflected off the golden trinkets she wore, bracelets, necklaces, and a crown of golden filigree. The man sighed heavily and took the time to appreciate the morning around him. It was indeed beautiful. The sun shined bright, the fields are green, the ground was soft and caressing to the touch, and it all belonged to him. However, the moment was lost again when pitted against his thoughts. He sighed and looked back down at the field below. I was given a prophecy.
Oh? Telling of the many millennia you will rule? The many strong sons and beautiful daughters you will have? How successful and rich you will make this world, and possibly more to be?
The woman walked up behind him, smiling, excited to hear the good news. It was thanks to the advice of their sibling prophet that they were even able to free themselves from the punishments and slavery of their father. He looked at her with a side eye. He wondered if he should tell her. Should he burden her with the responsibilities that are his to carry? He wondered if he would hurt her. He wondered if she would not want to be with him. He loved her. She loved him. He decided that the weight he must carry could possibly be an easier load with her comforting words and advice. He took a deep breath, looked straight ahead, and flatly stated, "One of my children will betray me."
The way we betrayed father?
She stopped smiling, and her posture shrank in fear at the possibility of one of their own children turning on them. I am unsure. She looked down and smiled at her lover.
It will not be the same. That would be impossible. You are the king of the Titans. You rule the most powerful creatures in existence. You have nothing to fear.
She took his hand in hers and smiled at him. He looked up at her, and her bright smile lit up the world. He smiled back, and he embraced her. But fear clouded his mind, tainting everything inside with its dark tint. It lingered. He castrated his father. The amount of blood and pain was great. It was many years of slavery, punishment, and ache. It would be worse for him. If fate saw it fit to punish him now, then surely fate would bring 10 times the pain. As he embraced and held her, he wondered what he could possibly do. He could never bring himself to hurt his own children. He wanted children so badly. He wanted to hug, hold, and raise sons and daughters of his own. But how could he? His mind wandered as fear gave rise to an anxiety that flooded his thoughts with a series of what-ifs, eventually outweighing his own desires for family and love. As a new morning rose, Kronos walked the grassy fields he usually overlooked. He ached. His stomach burned with each step, twisting and folding in on itself, but it seemed to help to continuously walk. It has been over 100 years since he decided to start swallowing his own children. Regret is a heavy chore, but he must carry it. His thoughts pained him as he knew that soon his wife Rhea would give birth to another child. He must carry on with his duty. He must protect himself, her, his family, and his legacy. He carries his burden for all Titans and for his love. He smiled at the mortals that passed by, men that had the youthful bodies and skin of 20-year-olds, but were far into their 80s. They waved and offered him greetings. He returned their greeting. The men asked excitedly for him to tell them of how the Titans were doing. He smiled and began to regale them of conquest and stories of the Titans. He knew that some of the Titans were out creating lands to conquer. They would populate the lands with deadly creatures and then hunt the lands. Sometimes, mortals who proved themselves were invited on hunts. He got lost in time, spending 3 days telling the excited men stories of his siblings. The more he told, the more they wanted to hear. On the third day, he was telling the story of Oceanus, his eldest brother, and how he had recently created a creature for the depths. This giant and deadly creature had many arms, a large maw, and was rumored to have the strength enough to challenge a titan. As he told the story, however, his stomach shifted and pained him greatly. The men around him questioned him, full of concern, but suddenly he realized it had been 3 days. Rhea, she was soon to have a child. She might have already had it. He smiled at the men, told them farewell, and rose into the clouds to fly home. He arrived as a storm started up in the clouds. His brightly decorated and inviting home seemed quiet and dark. No one was around. The halls were empty. This gave him relief. The guilt for what he must do was almost as heavy as his stomach. He hurried to the bedroom, and he was not surprised. There stood Rhea, a shadow of sadness around her. In her arms was a heavily swaddled newborn. It was quiet, no doubt because it was born with his strength. A flash of hope rolled through him. A son, possibly. A son he could teach to rule, to hunt, to game. No. He must push the thought away. He had to. He knew his beloved might have the same desires. He had to be quick. The longer she had with the baby, the more she would grow attached to it. He quickly ran up, and she quietly gasped as he took the swaddled babe from her hands. He quickly swallowed it down and gritted his teeth as it settled down in his stomach. He stood in pain for a moment before looking at Rhea. A flash of lightning came in through the only open window in the large bedroom. Her face showed no emotion as she just stared at him. He could feel her burning eyes. He slowly walked to her to embrace her. This baby hurt much more than the others. He couldn't continue down this path much longer. He held her close, despair overtaking him. Another chance to be a great father was lost. He wondered if he would ever get the chance to be better than his own father. He swallowed his sadness before talking. His wife must see him as the strong one. He must be the strength she can lean on. He took a moment to clear his thoughts and his emotions so that he could sound level. We must all do what we have to for the freedom of our people.
I know.
Deep beneath the surface, Phoebe sat on a heated rock with her eyes closed. Through her mind's eye, she kept watch over her family. They had continued traveling downward without her. The heat had risen too high, and she had to watch from a distance. She had to ensure that no more family would be lost. She smiled as Kronos and Hyperion made their way to the depths of the world. Knowing they would be saved, she turned her attention to the surface. Kronos looked at his hands as Hyperion and himself reached their destination. He could feel the tingling and burning sensation on his nerves. His skin was going black, starting to flake off, regrowing, and then turning black again. He was slightly mesmerized as he watched this cycle a few times. Hyperion brought him back as he slightly bumped into Kronos while walking past him. He smiled at Kronos as he had a slight orange glow, and Kronos knew the heat did not bother him at all. Their hair flowed to the side as they fought against a strong current of thick, heated, metallic liquid as it tried to force them off course. They took a few more steps, and Kronos strained as he opened a small crack in a thick wall. He could feel freezing temperatures push against him as the heat flowed over his back. He felt dizzy as he dived forward into the crevice of the wall. As he emerged from the wall, he looked out to see his family before him. Iapetus was here and had been here. His giant form, made of moving and floating stones and rocks, blended in with this massive cavern. The cavern was larger than any cavern Kronos had ever laid eyes on. It seemed to be around 1,500 miles in diameter and was a perfect sphere. It was designed to be a prison. This had been the first place Iapetus traveled when Kronos started his quest. Iapetus melded in and out of rock as he teleported around this giant cavern in various places while building many columns and spiraling structures. In the center of all this was Iapetus' son. He had been here since the original war, the war that Kronos had failed to save his family in. The war that had imprisoned or killed almost all of his kin. The giant titan stood outstretched. His palms were centered above his head and pressed against the rock, as if pushing this round ceiling. His legs were straight and pressed against the floor of the cavern. Kronos studied the Titan as he walked in. The freezing temperatures were hurting Hyperion, so he stayed near the outer wall of this cavern. But the Titan in the center was sweating. He had been struggling for thousands of years inside this cavern, pushing and having divine powers spinning him. Kronos reached out to Phoebe and wondered to himself. He knew Iapetus was the greatest smith, builder, and architect the world had ever seen. But what if he was wrong? Phoebe flooded his mind with visions of the world crumbling around them and every mortal soul dying, leaving the Titans either dead or in ruin. Without having their full divine power, Kronos wondered if they were making a mistake. He felt no response from his sister. Kronos stopped and studied Iapetus. He could see a father determined to release his son, a father who would not give up. Kronos looked into the eyes of the Titan who was outstretched. The Titan looked down at Kronos and winced in pain as his muscles ached. Iapetus finished building some kind of spiraling structure and column. He could feel cold air starting to fan around him as the spiraling column started spinning. Iapetus rose out of the cavern ground next to Kronos and stared at Kronos with his hollow black eyes. Kronos looked up at the imprisoned Titan once more. He looked young, with long and straight brown hair, brown eyes, and his muscles strained and built over time. Kronos closed his eyes, held his hands outward, and a golden glow pulsed out from him. A shimmering glow encompassed the entire cavern. Iapetus beckoned his son to let go. The outstretched Titan had watery brown eyes from tears building up. He knew why he was here. He knew this was a punishment, but he knew what happened if he didn't comply. He failed his family when trying to lead them against those who would betray them. And if he failed again, then all that he knew would die. Slowly, he released his hold on the rocky ceiling. He closed his eyes for a moment, waiting. After nothing happened, he reopened them and looked down at his father and Kronos as he started to shrink his form. Iapetus put a hand on Kronos' shoulder, and Kronos released time around them. The cold air rushed at them again. Kronos smiled as he opened his eyes and looked at the strong and young Titan before them. Kronos walked up to him, smiling. "We are gaining back our people, but there is a problem on the world we once ruled." The young Titan was looking at his palms, but turned his eyes upward to look at Kronos. His palms were rough, scabbed over, and his body ached. He rolled his shoulders and stretched his muscles. He was breathing deep from being anxious as his eyes peered through sweaty hair matted to his forehead. "Atlas is ready." In the time before the heroes we know, in the time before the Olympians, in the time before the world was inhabited, was a Titan that spent all of his time alone in the dark and always seeing beyond what others knew. His name was Kronos, and he made his home in the vastness of space. He would often talk to his brothers and sisters about their ambitions, the changes of the world, and their goals. However, as one of the firstborn, he was present for the cruelness and torture of their father. Thanks to the efforts of Kronos, Iapetus, Hyperion, and himself, no one would ever know how cruel he truly was. Kronos spent much of his time roaming the space around the known world and universe, only visiting in sparse times. One of his visits was because of the call of his son, Astrius, whom his wife, Eurybia, had borne some centuries ago. Astrius was aware of the conflict between Kronos and Rhea, but Astrius was truly neutral in his gaze from the constellations. His father had left him with the caretaking of the space above the planet and did not care to interfere. Kronos studied the pair and decided that it was between them and to not get involved. Never in any time past this was his wife made aware of what the father and son had known. Kronos was still watching though. He almost got involved when Kronos was ambushed, sick and obsessed, deep in his cups. Kronos narrowed his eyes on a strong, handsome, and young cupbearer. Curiosity got to him, and all he could do was watch. This cupbearer eventually gave Kronos enough wine laced with poison that the young man was able to attack. With a quick swing of a sword, the lethargic Kronos could not react. His stomach sliced open, and 5 young and strong gods emerged. As they immediately started attacking those around them, a large rock also slid out from his stomach. Kronos watched the Titans scatter as their leader was unconscious from the poison. Shortly after, he started to stir, but it was too late. Kronos' children fulfilled a prophecy as they took him deep into abyss to be imprisoned for all time. Kreus was deep in thought for many days as the world below him stirred with excitement, fear, and conflict. The second line of gods, known as the Olympians, were starting to fight titans across all of the world. After a few weeks, Kreus looked out from the world and deep into the vastness of his domain when his son came to him with company. Astrius was escorting 4 Olympians. One of them came forward looking very strong, and Kreus recognized the cupbearer. He introduced himself as Zeus. Kreus moved to him, floating in the vastness of space. Kreus' form was usually formed of constellations around him, but to make his new guest feel more at ease, he made himself their size and gave him a worldly form. His curled horns that had the form of ram horns were given a golden sheen and shaped him look more like a helmet. His face was given features, a dark white tone, and a bushy black beard. His eyes remained white and reflected the spark of life that his dark and cold part of the universe still had to create with, and his legs were covered in a black cloth that ended in swirling of stars and still connected him to his space. The young Olympian offered Kreus terms. If Kreus would remain neutral in this battle, then his son Astrius and himself would be allowed to live and keep their domain. Kreus considered his offer as he looked down at the world. He couldn't see his wife. He saw one of his sons being killed by a young Olympian woman, and he saw his other son fighting off several Olympians as they tried to detain him. He looked back into the eyes of Zeus. The young Olympian, full of confidence, never took his eyes off Kreus. He slowly agreed. He immediately turned from the world and fled into the darkness with regret, sadness, and sorrow. After many years, the Olympians returned to the space above. They were met only by Astrius. They told him that due to the loss of the Titans, then as punishment, all heroes and figures of worth deemed by the Olympians must be posted in the domain of Kreus and himself. Astrius nodded in agreement and began shaping the constellations as the Olympians saw fit. Around the turn of the next century, Astrius watched many times as a beautiful goddess rose out of the river each morning and circled the world. He later would find out her name was Eos, and together they would have 9 children. 4 of their children lived in the world below, but 5 stayed in the space above. The 5 children that stayed in the space were named Phaenon, also known as Saturn, Phaethon, also known as Jupiter, Pyros, also known as Mars, Diosporos, also known as Venus, and Stilbon, also known as Mercury. Together these 5 children were called Astra Planeta, or just the Astra. The 5 children spent many centuries together, and during these centuries they met and learned about secrets that the Olympians and other Titans would never know. The Astria often flew together and played among the stars. They were thankful to never run out of space to play, but they did get lonely sometimes, with only the company of just a busy father and the vast emptiness surrounding them. That is why one occurrence took their intrigue forever. There was a small flash of light, and the 5 youths flew quickly with the power of the stars in their hands and ready to fight whatever may come. However, as the light subsided, they were greeted by a small figure. It was humanoid, with pale skin, long blonde hair, and wore silver plate armor. The Astra stared at him for a moment before they composed themselves. This creature looked human, but was very skinny, had no visible strength, and had pointy ears. After some moments, the Astra demanded to know who he was. The creature smiled, recognizing their innocent curiosity, and he introduced himself as Coralon. He spent many years with the Astra afterwards. He told them of elves, the magic that mortals can use, and about how there are many planes of existence. He looked down at the world below many times, but the Astra and Astrius told him of the personality of the Olympians, and he decided to keep his current company. After he decided it was time to leave, the Astra said goodbye, but afterwards realized that his company would be missed. He was the only company they had ever had. Astrius watched them with sadness before he gifted them a constellation. Using small pieces that would not do for work given to him by the Olympians, Astrius pieced together a small copy of their friend. The Astra took care of this new elf made of constellations. They gave him knowledge that they had learned from the elf, and knowledge from the world below. For many centuries after that, the small elf served as a conversation piece. He also was a way for them to test learning the magics that their old friend had spoken of. Every now and then, he would be sent to the world below on errands when the Astra wanted to meddle in the affairs of mortals undetected. As the elf stayed dormant and existed in quiet stillness, the Astra watched carefully at the events that were starting to unfold. The Astra approached Astrius and asked him why they did not interfere on behalf of the Titans. Astrius explained that they were Titans, but they now served the Olympians due to a conflict from long ago. The Astra were going to ask more, but Crius reappeared from the blank space around them. He looked at his son, his grandchildren, and then at the elven creature. He turned to Astrius. For a long time we have sat and watched. You have seen the Olympians destroy the world our kin created. No longer is there prosperity, happiness, and immortality. There's death, disease, and a surprising amount of violence for petty squabbles. I can no longer look down at the world without feeling sickness. In my travels I was approached by a man of size, adorned in armor, a sword, and a winged helmet. He told me of others who would meet us and help us. His name was Harmolter, and he was a messenger. We must fight back this time. We must contribute, and we will prepare to fight. Astrius, confused, watched as Crius took the elf made of constellations and threw him at the world below.
The Foloi Oak Forest, about 25 miles inland from the Adriatic Sea, is an infamous forest. It is dense with tall, broadleaf oak trees, ranging from 49 to 65 feet in height, and these giant trees can live up to 200 years. Ferns grow around these giant trees, and the dense forest floor is made up of deciduous oak fallen from the trees over centuries. This large forest spans over 30 square miles. Deep in this forest was its reason for being infamous. While it was beautiful, and to walk inside its natural foliage was a gift, it was also a trial of survival. Many wild animals called this forest home, but it was also home to dryads, nature folk who used natural magic to protect their territory, and it was home to centaurs. Centaurs are proud and fierce hunters and trackers, often viewing humans as a weaker form of life. The centaurs themselves were half human and half horse. They were said to be the offspring of King Ixion, a king who was the son of Ares, murdered his father-in-law, tried to seduce Hera, the wife of Zeus, and then was cursed to give us the offspring we now know as centaurs. They were powerful, fast, and had many benefits that gave them the perfect gifts for what Zeus wanted to use them for. In exchange for their ever-vigilant watch over a temple in this forest, Zeus would leave them in the forest and only send would-be heroes after them one at a time, and watch over the temple they did. In the forest, in the heart of the Centaur clan, was a limestone temple. Divine magic protected it from natural disasters and decay. The centaurs created a dangerous reputation for killing all those who would cross into their territory or start to get too close to this temple. Thanks to the centaurs, no one outside the clan had seen the temple in over 300 years. But even the centaurs themselves did not know how old the temple actually was. On an early morning, midsummer, the centaurs stood outside the temple. They were very still. They were standing among the trees and ferns, hands mid-gesture. They may have been talking, picking up hunting or gathering tools, or just going for a walk. However, at this very moment, they were still. The insects created a constant background noise. Birds could be heard talking in the trees, and leaves could be heard rustling from the wind above the forest floor. Over 40 centaurs surrounded the limestone temple. It was only about 20 feet high, and was a simple design of large blocks stacked on top of each other to form a pyramid with a simple doorway about 7 feet high but with no door attached to it. On the other side of this temple was a river. It usually flowed through the forest, and a centaur leaned over it with a basket. But today, like the centaur, the river stood still. It did not move, and no fish in it moved either. After a few moments of the winds blowing through this settlement, there was a snapping sound, the sound of a branch snapping as Hyperion stepped up to be beside Kronos in the doorway of this temple. A long blade made of light was being absorbed into Hyperion's hand as he moved next to Kronos. Kronos looked around at the still settlement, then at the door, and stepped in. As Kronos stepped inside the doorway, the river started flowing, the fish started swimming, and the centaur with the basket fell into the river. Centaurs around the settlement started falling. One of these centaurs had wide eyes as he was able to start moving again. He had a bow in his hand, horn at his side, and a distressed look. Age and tough skin showed fear as he started to reach for the horn, started to cry out for Zeus, but no sound came out. An opening was forming on his throat, and blood started to flow. A clean, deep, and seared cut about 6 or 7 inches formed across his neck. His eyes turned red, blood started to flow from his mouth and the wound, and within 3 seconds, this veteran centaur hunter was on the forest floor with his hand on the horn. As Kronos and Hyperion entered the temple, Phoebe came into the settlement, walking slowly. She started rolling centaurs on their side, laying their arms in front of their chest, and fitting 2 abuls in their mouths, a pseudo coin with an insect imprinted on it. These coins have no sign of attachment and are too thin for normal use. She quietly whispered to herself as she did this. The 2 brothers stepped inside this very well-lit temple. Kronos blinked a couple of times as his eyes adjusted. There were more than 20 torches in this room, the size of a small house. There is a line of fire burning on the floor level, a line of fire burning around the room at chest level, and another line of fire burning around the ceiling level. There are 3 barrels of oil off in a corner. There is also a burning pyre in the middle of this temple, but no smoke. Coming up from under this pyre are many vines growing towards the doorway, but they were black and long dead. They both started walking around the temple, putting out torches, and then Kronos starts gathering dirt and putting it on the oil-fueled lines of fire as Hyperion uses dirt to put out the large pyre. After it is dark in the temple, Hyperion uses his light to create a shovel, and he hands it to Kronos. Kronos steps back outside the temple and starts digging a trench from the river to the temple. As he is digging, there is a large crashing sound as Hyperion flies from the ground and up through the roof, flooding the temple with light. Then he glides back down and starts clearing away debris. It doesn't take long for a divine being to dig a trench, or to clear away limestone rocks from a caved-in ceiling. After about 10 minutes, the brothers knock down and clear the temple wall between the river and the inside of the temple. Then they sit, and they wait. The water flows into the center of the temple, and the sun lights up the ground where a pyre once burned. After a few hours, the soil soaking up water and sunlight is starting to fall away. Like a cavern built under the ground, dirt, water, and light begin to sink and fall away until there is a large opening in the ground about 6 feet across. Large brown vines slither up and out of this pit and slither around as if sensing the area around the hole. After the vines appear satisfied, a woman is lifted up by the vines and onto the temple floor next to the brothers. A tan woman wearing green leather with a leaf style stands before the brothers. She was barefoot, had green leather greaves that were shaped like a leaf, and she wore a top that covered her hands, arms, shoulders, lower chest, and stomach, that fell from there to a green flowing cloth between her legs, as if changing from leather to a cloth material mid-fall. Sharp thorns and leaves came off her shoulders like pauldrons, and only her lower neck and upper chest were exposed. She wore a serious and stern face that was adorned by a very large headdress of leaves and forest foliage. The leaves grew out from her head by almost 2 feet, and the roots buried themselves into her forehead. Her eyebrows could barely be seen as she narrowed her eyes at her brothers. Hyperion and Kronos both stood and smiled. Phoebe entered the temple doorway. The woman turned and lightly nodded her head to Phoebe, and Phoebe did the same in kind. She turned back to Kronos as he started to speak. I am sorry it took me a while to get to you, but the world is different now. You will find a lot of your creations have been cut down in their prime. However, an unnatural evil has entered our world, and the one who imprisoned you must be punished. At this, the woman's stern lips curled up into a smirk.
Dawn. Twin siblings run through a thick forest with a hint of sea salt in the air. Giggling and laughing can be heard as the pair hunt the last titan that was believed to be involved with the death and mutilation of an Olympian god named Zagreus. This titan was quite resilient and had tried to lie its way out of its death, claiming Hera tricked the titans. However, no Olympian cared. The titans were allowed to exist because they let them. No mercy, no sorrow, no need for judgment. It was time to finish off the titans, for good. The twins had volunteered to give chase to the titan as it fled the wrath of Zeus. They enjoyed the hunt. One of them, a young man with bronze-colored tunic draped over one shoulder, a bronze belt, a golden bow fit for a god, and his thick golden-brown hair flowing in the wind behind him, and as he ran, he pointed at his twin and gestured for her to make a wide circle. He planned to flank the titan. His sister, a young, pale Olympian with long and slightly curled black hair, wearing just a simple white tunic, and she smiled as she notches an arrow and narrows her eyes. The Olympian gods moved with incredible speed as they began their flanking maneuver. However, Artemis suddenly stopped. She stares at the rising sun, remembering its beautiful reflection on the Aegean Sea as it rises, and a tear forms as a shadow from dawn's light reveals itself. Artemis knows this titan could end her immortality. Nephil, a titan who has always belonged to the forest, tilted their head and lowered their clawed arm as Artemis slid off of it. A giant hole in Artemis's throat replaced the spot where her vocal cords used to be. Nephil just stared. This is not what they wanted. They just wanted to live in their forest and be left alone. Now they were being hunted, and after this decision, they knew that their life was forfeit. Nephil has never been the titan people wanted to look at for beauty. They had yellow eyes like a predator, and a long and narrowing muzzle like a horse that ended in a wet nose like a dog, and the lower jaw extended to hold many sharp and long fangs that they possessed. Their short fur on their body was white, and a thick and long mane of light red hair flowed from behind their ears to the mid-neck. They had a short and sharp horn on their forehead. Their arms were a mix of short and sticky hairs and feathers that folded under the arms. One of the arms ended in a sharp clawed hand, and the other ended in 3 hooked, sharp-bladed talons. Their lower body was a blue-scaled figure, 6 muscular legs, and their tail was 2 fins with a free-swinging stinger in between them. Nephil is assuming that these twins have the same flaws that all Olympians do. Arrogance. Nephil could hear every movement of the young boy Apollo. His light and quick footsteps are only a dozen feet away. His scent is all over the place as his speed carries the wind with him. The boy has no idea that how obvious he is. Nephil considers trying to make it a fair fight. But no, their life is on the line. As Apollo cleared a brush, releasing an arrow where Nephil stood, they stepped aside at the same time. Apollo's smile faded as a stinger rose up to meet him. The momentum of his leap from the brush carried him into the stinger. He let out a whimper as he felt the stinger enter his chest and then push further in. The black poison of this titan started to make his golden blood grow cold. As Nephil approached Apollo's dying body with their claw ready, lightning struck the ground where they stood. Shock, tingling, pain, and numbness surged through Nephil all at once. They let out a howl, cry, and growl as they looked up. This was it. This is where Nephil's fate ended. They knew they were no prey, though. Nephil was a predator, and they were in the forest. If this was what Zeus wanted, then he will have to fight while his children lay dying. Nephil lowered their hind legs and strafed their front legs, ready to leap in any direction. Claw at the ready and talons open, Nephil let out a low and steady growl, waiting. Another lightning bolt struck the ground hard, but Nephil smelled the lightning produced ozone and leaped out of the way. As they turned around, claws and talons ready, Zeus stood there. He stared hard as all of his muscle flexed with anger. Lightning spilled from his eyes, mouth, and fingers as he assaulted the titan who killed his son that would have been the future ruler. Nephil leaped side to side in small hops as Zeus closed the gap, throwing lightning and insults. Zeus raised his arms as a stream of lightning began to appear. The stream of lightning is what destruction was made of. Hera walked into the forest area where Apollo and Artemis lay still. She sneered at the Titan and her husband as she dragged the twins by the ankle away in order to tend to their wounds. And as the lightning stream finished and Zeus was about to release it, a strong claw gripped his wrist. He pressed forward, golden blood spilling from his wrist. He had to ease the tension as 3 sharp talons dug into his side. He gripped the hand with the talons and pushed the talons out of himself. He groaned and screamed in anger as Nephil growled in his back. Unfortunately, Zeus is too strong of an Olympian for Nephil. Zeus pushed the talons back and gave them a shove in the chest with his palm. Nephil slid away from the forceful push, crouched their hind legs, and started to leap. As they started to leap, Zeus finished releasing his lightning bolt. A giant black hole now filled the unconscious remains of Nephil. Zeus gritted his teeth and shook the golden blood off of his arm. He raised one hand and pointed at Nephil's remains with the other. Lightning started striking the remains over and over, pushing the remains into the ground and burning them with each strike. He exclaimed in anger,
"This is where you fall. This is where Titans die. Tartarus will have you for eternity."
Hera, helping Apollo limply walk, came to stand beside her husband. "A simple forest?" she asked curiously.
Zeus, still angry, replied, "No, I will fill it with reptiles with 10 times the strength of man and the hunger of the void."
With that, Zeus glared at the remains as they were burned and buried and started to walk away.